work whenever you turn them on. That's the first key to electrons. So tonight we're continuing our study with walking where the faithful walked. Tonight we're going to be continuing our study looking at Jerusalem. A lot of this is based off of the trip that Andrea and myself, Richard and Ruth McCool, and Jack and Sherry Lachlan, and several of us from the church went over to Israel. But there's several other things that I want to share with you that hopefully will come through in this study. So first, foremost, to repeat where we started, is how important Jerusalem is. In Psalm 137, verse 5 through 6, the psalmist writes, "If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its skill. If I don't remember you, let my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth. If I do not exalt Jerusalem above my chief joy." It just goes to show this love for this city, this incredible city that has worldwide fame and infamy. If there's any city that has both, it would be Jerusalem. And that's because it is the world's most influential city, historical city in all the world. It is the center of Jewish religion, the center of Christian religion. It is the center of Muslim religion. When I say the center of Christian religion, of course, I'm talking about that's because that's where the church began. There is no headquarters in the Lord's church like there is in other religious bodies, but Jerusalem is where it all began. That's where our Lord and Savior walked. It's where the apostles lived and walked, and so it's important being that center of worship. And it was the center of worship for the world whenever God established his temple there. It's highly prized over the years. Has been many wars fought over it. But what's interesting about Jerusalem that we see today is it's not the same Jerusalem that Jesus would have seen. This Jerusalem that we see today is being uncovered. And that's what I want to show you today. There's some things that have been uncovered. So we're going to begin by looking in 2 Kings chapter 20, verse 20. And this verse, during the time of Hezekiah, it says, "Now the rest of the acts of Hezekiah," it's already talked about a lot of things he did, "all his might," and listen to this, "how he made a pool and a tunnel and brought water into the city," talking about Jerusalem there, "are they not written in the book of Chronicles of the Kings of Judah?" That's what I want you to see. The Bible mentions these things. And there's been, for many, many years, a lot of historians that have said, see, you can't trust the Bible. There's no tunnel that we've discovered that Hezekiah dug. There's nothing like, and all these different things that they say. By the way, this has been going on for 2,000 years. For many, many years, they said there's no such thing as the Hittites. Well, there was a discovery. And they learned that not only was there the Hittites, there was a Hittite nation, there was an entire law that they had, and just incredible discovery. Not too long ago, there was a discovery where many people said that David is a figment of the writer's imagination. There's no historical evidence of David, King David. Just within the last 10 years, there's been a discovery that shows the house of David. So it's almost like God has a sense of humor. As soon as we get all high and mighty and everything and think that we want to start to negate his word, it's almost like he just kind of uncovers something for us and we discover something. And that seems to be the case, and you'll see even with this, because what we're going to look at is Hezekiah's tunnel, that very tunnel that he talked about. We're going to look at the pool of Siloam. That's the pool that he's talking about. And there's some amazing discoveries there. And then another discovery called the Pilgrimage Road. Now, it begins by a discovery. In the 1800s, there were some archaeologists and some people that were just digging around, and they came across this inscription written inside this little cave, this water tunnel. And it said, "Behold the tunnel, while the stonecutters were lifting the axe, one man toward his neighbor, and while there remained 3 cubits to be cut, the voice of a man could be heard calling out to his neighbor, and where they were supposed to meet up. Axe against axe, and waters from the source flowed from the pool for a distance of 1,200 cubits. Now 100 cubits was the height, the head of a stonecutter." So about 6 feet. So what was happening was, this is a description, this is the meeting place where some tunnel diggers began on this end, and some other tunnel diggers began on this end and started carving rock, and they could hear each other when they got to this point to where they finally met, and then the water flowed through. And it was the discovery, they realized, of Hezekiah's tunnel. So I want to show you how that came about and what that is and why that's important. Because it says in that same passage that he brought water into the city. So you remember last class, maybe, if not, you can watch it online, where we talked about the city of Jerusalem itself. That the city of Jerusalem itself began as a little bitty walled city up on a hill. It was called Jebus. The Jebusites are the ones who lived there. And this would be what Jebus was like. It was just this one little area. Now, there's a mountain back behind Jebus. That's Mount Moriah. That's where, remember Josh this morning was talking about how Abraham took his son up there to sacrifice. Well, that's Mount Moriah, which is where the temple of God would be built, which just outside there and right on Mount Moriah is where Jesus would be crucified. And so that was the city of Jebus. Now what's important about it is this little outcropping. So you see that little area that kind of sticks out. The reason that's kind of juts out like that is because down in the Kidron Valley, there's a natural spring called the Gihon Spring. And it runs continually, and it provides fresh water. Well, one of the reasons that you have walls is to protect from invaders. But unfortunately, they can also be used against you if an army shows up and they surround you. That's what's called being siege, whenever they put up a siege around you, and they basically starve you out. And if you don't have water and food, you're eventually, they just got to wait you out. And you're going to eventually surrender or die or be overtaken. Well, that's the beauty of the city of Jebus, is it had its own water supply. So all they had to do is have plenty of food stocked up, and they had water. They didn't have to worry about it. And that's what that little outcropping thing is right there. Those walls that extend out is to protect that spring. When we get to the time of Hezekiah, the city has grown. So you still see that little triangular thing. See how there's triangular there? And here it is again, that triangular piece. But now that outcropping, that little extra, has been extended. It's still there. And still protecting the Gihon Spring. So now the city is much larger, but it has protection for that spring so that they can have water. Now, during all this growth and everything that was the city being built, Hezekiah built this pool called the Pool of Siloam. And it is fresh water, and it's designed for multiple purposes. One, it's a water source for the city, but it becomes a place of purification for the temple. It's also where Jesus performed a miracle. And we'll talk about that more in just a few moments. So what Hezekiah did is he brought that spring from where the spring is down to that pool, and he did it by digging a tunnel through all that rock to get the water down there. If I cut away the mountain of which Jerusalem is on, it's kind of like that. So just a gradual slope, because that's part of water engineering, is you don't want to go too steep, you'll create a waterfall. You don't want to go too high or it'll stall. And so you got to hit it just right. So these guys, you think about back then, this is 3,000 years ago that these people are digging these tunnels. And they did it beautifully. And they met in the middle, which is even more fascinating. Now, let's dig into, no pun intended, a little deeper into the Hezekiah tunnel. And here's another picture for you. You might be thinking, well, okay, well, how did they draw water? So I want to zoom in on this little area right here, this little cutaway, so you can see what this looks like. So back in the time of Jebus, that spring, this is, if I cut away the side of the mountain and you see, there's the Gihon Spring down here in the bottom. So this right here is the spring. So there it is. And here's those walls right here. You see the walls? That's these walls right here. And it's really these right here. This is a protected passage where they could come down here and they could drop their buckets down in here and get water from this spring. And see, you got that wall protecting them from arrows and everything else. So that's how they originally got their water. Well, sometime, and we don't know exactly when, but during the time of the Canaanites, during the time of when it was the city of Jebus, they also dug out a tunnel system in a steep, and I want you to remember these words, a steep tunnel entrance. They came down real steep right here, came down, and then they went straight down and they dug a little bit more so that they drew the water further back up closer into the city. And what would happen is they could now just go down and get their water without even arrows being thrown at them, because while that's nice to have a wall, arrows still come over the wall and you can be attacked while you're trying to get water right there. So now they can do it from protection of inside. Now, here's an interesting aspect and where the Bible comes alive. That little shaft right there that they dug down in order to get the water and bring it further into the city is known as Warren's Shaft. That's because there was this archaeologist by the name of Charles Warren who discovered it in the 1800s, this vertical shaft. And he put together what the Bible says. Go with me to 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 8. And I want to show you why this matters, this that I'm showing you. In 2 Samuel chapter 5, verse 8, this is when David decides he wants to conquer the city of Jebus. And it says, now David said on that day, whoever climbs up by the way of the, what? Water shaft. Now, that's what the New King James says. And defeats the Jebusites, the lame and the blind, who are hated by David's soul, he can become chief and captain. Therefore they say, blind and the lame shall not come up into this house. So the Jebusites were so proud of themselves, they said, oh, you'll never beat us, knowing that they had this water source. Like, ain't nobody ever going to take this city. And so David went on. It says that David dwelt in the stronghold, and it was Joab who went up through that water shaft. That's what we read in 1 Chronicles chapter 11. That word that is there is the word in Hebrew, senor, which means a waterway or water shaft. And one of Charles Warren's sergeants in his outfit went and proved that verse, saying it is traversable. Now here's what he meant. Whenever David attacked Jebus, Joab is down here, and they figured out, wait a minute, there's an entrance into the city. If we can breach this and get into the Gihon spring right here where their spring is, because you see this little thing right here, this is a channel that they cut out. Not only did the water go into that one area of the city where they could get water, but you got all this, water's got to go somewhere. So they cut a channel that would go out, and it would send water to the fields and everything down in the Kidron Valley. Well, Joab and David figured that out. So Joab, he goes up through and into the city and takes the city by climbing up that shaft. Isn't that something? And so here, Charles Warren has discovered this and shown that, yes, it absolutely can be done. And so there is that aspect of it. Now, we move forward in time. We come up to the time of Hezekiah. So this was the time of before the Jebusites, but now we're at the time of Hezekiah. Still the same scenario. We have this Gihon spring, and there's this area now by this time right here that is called the Rock Cut Pool. Now some archaeologists, we don't know exactly, but some archaeologists believe that this was open to the air, maybe like this right here. See how that's kind of open? Well, this whole area was opened up, and then even at later times was covered over, so again it was protected. Either way, it is this large pool that I'm going to show you in a little bit, where the water would gather, where lots and lots of people could get water from. And what Hezekiah did was he extended that tunnel that they had dug. So everybody had to get in the tunnel and come to that one shaft and drop their buckets down in there and everything. Well, that's a long line. So he extended the tunnel, so now they can go all the way down to this larger pool area and get their water to be able to take to their households and everything. Well, that worked pretty well for a considerable amount of time. whenever all that was taking place. This is by the time we get to Hezekiah. That tunnel had been dug to be able to do that and everything. And Hezekiah says, there's got to be a better way where we can get more access. And that's where the verse comes in that we read earlier. He brings the water into the city. See, the problem is the Gihon Spring, and no matter what you do, it's out here. It's outside. There's the main city walls up on the mountain, up on the hill. Here's the Kidron Valley down here. There's all those fields and everything. And there's the water, and that's outside the city. So he wants to bring it inside the city once and for all. So what he does is he digs this tunnel from that point all the way over to the pool of Siloam. It's very interesting how he does. So here's a side cut view so you can get the picture again. Now, this is what we think is happening because it's hard to map all this stuff because there's so many layers. That's the thing. You see this brown stuff right here? This is all buried. This was all completely buried. Those walls are not there anymore. There's new walls that are up here, which I showed you in the last one. This wall's not here even at all, but we have found the base. And then this was all covered over. So we've had to kind of map all this together. And if you look at a upward view, in other words, an overhead view looking down, you'll notice, see, it looks like this is just a straight walk down to that rock cut pool. Well, it's not that at all. It's all winds around and everything. Here's Warren's Shaft. So they used to come down here and go to Warren's Shaft. Well, then they extended it down to this big rock cut pool. There's a picture, which you'll see in just a moment. And then what we have seen down here are the ruins of those towers. That's what this is right here. These are ruins. This is a modern day overview. Looking at the map, if you will, if you were to go there and see it, they're trying to tell you this is what you're going to do. We're going to go down here and we're going to go to the rock cut pool, and then you'll see all that. The Gihon Spring is back over here. There's a section where you can see that. You're going to see these towers, and then right here is the tunnel that Hezekiah dug. Now you'll notice, here's the Gihon Spring. There's where they dug it out to get it to that shaft area. Notice it kind of winds around. Then they dug that area that is that pool, and so they have really kind of two ways going there. And then here's where Hezekiah starts digging his tunnel. So you see it's kind of, we're talking thousands of years of everybody trying to work all this stuff out and everything. Now, here's what it looks like when you go down into that steep tunnel I was telling you about. The entrance to get down into the Gihon Spring is you go down these steep steps, and somewhere right down there, I left, not on purpose, but a piece of my camera. I was filming this, and this little piece that I used it's a clicker, it fell off, and it's a grate, and I could not reach it, so there's still a piece of my property in Jerusalem. But there's Andrea going down into that tunnel. And when you get down into that tunnel, here you can see the ruins of those towers. So here's an artist's concept of those towers I was telling you. There's that protected walkway where you could get down, and there's the Gihon Spring inside there. And so these are the bases of those towers. This is all underground, y'all. This is all what they've dug out and discovered, and now you can go there and tour this and see this area that has Bible history, such as Joab and David conquering the city of Jerusalem through this area. I showed you that picture a minute ago of Warren's Shaft looking down into that. Well, here's that rock cut pool. So when you go all the way down and you go past Warren's Shaft and then you go down a little further, you come to this area, and it's lit up blue to make you think it's full of water. It's not, it's empty. But you see there, this is where people would come down to, and it's much bigger. As you can see, there's a lot of people gathered there, and they could get their water in the protection underground to be able to get their water that they needed. Now, if we turn around and look down into the deeper part of that rock-hewn pool, you can see this was the original channel where the water flowed in from the Gihon Spring, and this was a channel that went off to begin Hezekiah's tunnel that then goes on through worn shaft and everything. This is what it looks like inside when you can walk through today. You can take tours and walk through Hezekiah's tunnel. The water from the Gihon spring is still flowing today. And as you can see in that picture, it comes up to about midway through your calves. There is no electricity inside, so you have to wear a headlamp, and you can follow that tunnel. And there's an overhead map, so you start up here where the Gihon spring is, and you walk 1,500 or 1,700 feet down to this area, this is called the Byzantine Pool of Siloam, and I'll show you that in just a minute. But then there's that other tunnel I was telling you about, the Canaanites. Remember I said that they watered their fields and everything? Well, they wound up extending that a little bit further so that they could water those fields a little further down and stuff, and I'll show you that in just a second. Question?
Yes, please. What's the quality of the water?
Drinkable. Still today. It's an artesian well, and so it is, I guess that's what you call it, artesian well. It's still drinkable today. Yeah, good question. All right, so when you go into Hezekiah's tunnel, you can pass that inscription that I showed you at the beginning. Now, it's not the same one. They've cut that one out, and it's in a museum somewhere, but this is one. It tells you this is the place. You're standing in the place of where the Siloam inscription was, where it was written approximately 2,700 years ago. Isn't that amazing? To go and see that and walk through that. Now, this is where you come out. And so as you go through, you come out in this one area. And for many, many years, people thought this was the Pool of Siloam. We're going to get to that in just a moment. But this is where you come out when you take that tour of Hezekiah's tunnel. And you can see right here, there's Jack Lachlan. I think there's Richard right there. Several other people, all members of the church there that were on that tour with us. So there's a picture of Jerusalem. Here is the old city of Jebus right here. And so Hezekiah dug this tunnel. But what we have discovered is that there's another place called this pool. The pool, now we know, is the Pool of Siloam. And here's some artist renderings of what we think that might look like based off of what I'm going to show you here in just a moment. Oh, is a question? Oh, okay. I didn't know somebody else had a question. So now, here's where the Pool of Siloam comes into play. In John chapter 9, we see Jesus performed a miracle. He healed a man who'd been blind since birth. And he tells the man, go and wash in the Pool of Siloam, which is translated sent. So he went and washed, came back. And then the Pharisees, of course, they caught him and they want to know who it was. And he said, a man called Jesus healed me and said, go wash in the Pool of Siloam. So this pool was there during the time of Jesus. And for centuries, everybody thought this was the Pool of Siloam. Well, come to find out, and this, by the way, is from back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s. This is what you saw just a minute ago where Jack and them were. This pool was actually dug out and put there by Constantine, Emperor Constantine's mother, who identified all these spots around Israel of where all these things happened. I mean, they identified everything. This is where John jumped in Elizabeth's belly. Okay? How they know that? They don't. They were just guesstimating. And because this water, this section was opened up, they thought this was the Pool of Siloam for many, many years, until 2004. There was a crew, a construction crew that was working on a sewer line in modern Jerusalem because it was clogged up or something. They were working on it, and they started digging with an excavator, and they went clunk. Wait, what was that? And they started digging out, and this is the picture that was taken. It's like, there's some steps right here. So they called, there's an entire department in Israel that their whole department is about archaeology. And so they came and they started digging some more. They stopped all that construction and they found more stairs. They just kept extending and kept extending. That was 2004. And then they kept digging and there's more stairs. And this is what it looked like when we visited in 2022. This they've discovered is the pool of Siloam, because this is where all that water. See that hole that the Queen Mother had discovered, they never knew where the water went. It's like, well, the water comes in right here, but it keeps going. And so they thought, well, it just goes away. No, it went to this place right here, the pool of Siloam. And this is the terminus, the end of where that water goes from Hezekiah's tunnel. And so they put all these pieces together. But here was one of the things, for many, many years after they did that, I told you that was 2004. Here we are, almost 20 years later, when we're there, you'll notice this is all still earth. And there are buildings that are back over here, and office buildings and stuff. And, oh man, they were chomping at the bit. What? How far does this thing extend out? So that was the big question. It's like, this is just one side of it. This thing's got to be incredible. Probably the whole thing is here. We want to see the pool of Siloam. Well, fortunately, in 2024, they began digging. So whenever Andrea and I were there, that's as far as we could see, was that wall right there. And then all this was, as you see, there's modern buildings. This shows you how far down the pool of Siloam is. And so they started digging. Well, they didn't find any more stairs or stones. Doesn't mean it wasn't there, just they didn't find them because they kept digging. But what they did find is this thing's a lot deeper than we realized. And they kept digging until on one end they discovered this, which is a dam that was built during the time of Hezekiah and during that time frame whenever the pool of Siloam would have been built. It's to hold back the water, to build it up. And so there is now, at least they know, and they're starting to see how big it is and how wide it is. So there's that dam. Here's another picture of it, looking a little bit back, looking at it. You can see how tall and how deep they've gone. So the pool's a lot deeper, which makes sense, doesn't it, if you want to keep water for an entire city? Oh yeah, it does need to be deeper. And then here is those steps. So right up here is where those steps are, and there's that pavilion where we had a little devotional and everything. But here's, it shows you how far they've dug at and how far down, and then there's that dam, and that's because it's that part right there. You see it's right there in that central valley, and they got to stop the water from going out. So that's why they built the dam there, to hold that water, to be able to release it the way that they needed to. And so it shows a little bit more of the discoveries that's showing the proof of that pool of Siloam. So here, I'll take you on a quick tour. This is Andrea. We're going to follow Andrea. Andrea was not about to go into that one that was no electricity. So we're going the other one. So here's going down that steep tunnel that was cut out that the ancient Israelites used to go down into, or the Canaanites even, to get. There's Warren's shaft, looking down there where they would have gotten their water. Now we are down in that rock-cut pool, and you can walk and see how big that is, and looking around there and all the folks, also called the Canaanite pool. There's those towers that I showed you, and this is going on down, and now they're going into Hezekiah's tunnel. And Andrea says, nope, that's way too dark. We're going in the lighted tunnel where there's no water. And that's what she's saying right here. They all went the other way, we're going this way. We're going to go through the Canaanite tunnel. So this tunnel is actually older, and some of it was exposed before. It was a channel. Is that not? There we go. It's a little dark up there. It's a channel that was cut, that was exposed up above, and parts of it also, but now being a tunnel. And so this is, we were walking with John and Carla Moore, who were the ones guiding this tour. And John explained, he goes, this is what I believe is the Senor. This is what Joab would have walked his way through and then got over to Warren's shaft, or up to the Gihon Spring and over, and then up Warren's shaft and up through that steep place that I showed you just a minute ago to be able to get in. And this tunnel is much shorter than the Hezekiah tunnel. And I'm not showing you the whole thing through. We're going to speed up here in just a second. But I really wanted you to get a good idea of just how claustrophobic that was. Have any of y'all ever been to Rock City? This is kind of like Rock City. It's got a Fat Man Squeeze in it. So this is now coming out of the tunnel. There's Miss Ruth McCool coming up right there. And here's coming up out of, there's the Kidron Valley that you just saw, and there is the pool of Siloam. There's Jack and all of them coming out of They have now walked through the water and everything, and this is where they came out into the Byzantine pool of Siloam. And now we're going to walk up and we're going to go to that pool of Siloam that we now have identified as the pool. So here you can see is our group walking in. There it is, looking down onto those steps that were there in 2022. And we had a little devotional right there. Just reading those passages that I read to you and more that had to do with that. And it was just so powerful to bring it alive. Here's John Moore, World Video Bible School there on the left. That's Matt Kane doing some videotaping for World Video Bible School. There's a whole lot of wonderful videos about this. Now, coming up from the pool, here's what I want to take you to next. You walk up from the pool of Siloam and you walk this way. And if I turn around, we come to what is now been discovered as the Jerusalem Pilgrimage Road. This is another fascinating aspect. This was discovered underneath all of those modern houses. That sewage system they were working on, well, those houses are still there. And as they were digging those stones, they kept expanding out, and they kept going, as you just saw me, when we came back up, and then I turned around, they kept going, and I said, these steps keep going. And they kept digging and kept digging. And so now, what we have discovered is what is known as what we read in passages, which now brings to life. Acts chapter 3, verse 1, Peter and John went up to the temple at the hour of prayer, the 9th hour. Now, we've talked about going up to Jerusalem, but now we're going up to the temple. And this is what we believe they were doing. They were going up this walkway. So there's the pool of Siloam, and there's this walkway that was an open air walkway that people could walk up to the temple. So they could come into the city. There's many entrances right down here. They come into the city. They could come to the pool of Siloam. They could be purified and then sing the songs of ascent and go up to the temple. This is things that we didn't know at all until 2004 when they started discovering these things. And so this is an artist's rendering of what that would have looked like. So you have this city street of all these pilgrims that are coming in from all over. This is what happened on the day of Pentecost. You got all those nations. Well, they would have come into Jerusalem. They would have purified themselves in one of the many pools that are in Jerusalem. You have Bethesda and a few others, but there's that main one, the pool of Siloam, that they would have purified themselves. They would have gone up. They would have bought their spices and their turtle doves and whatever it is that they need as they're going up into that city, up to the temple to worship and pray. If we zoom out a little bit, there's another aspect of this I'll tell you about in just a second. This is drainage channel that's right here, because you got to have drainage if you have city streets, and that's going to come into play in just a little bit. But here's what it looks like today, as they were digging that out. And today, you can walk those steps from the pool of Siloam all the way up to the temple, just like those ancient Israelites did in the time of Jesus and before and after. Today, you can take a tour and begin down at the pool of Siloam and ascend. It's called the Road of Ascension. There are Psalms 138, I believe it is, to about 145 are called Psalms of Ascension, and they're joyful psalms. They're talking about ascending up to the temple of God. That's what it's talking about. These are psalms that they would sing and pray as they're going up to worship. And remember, this would all be open air. And even this one area where they put in kind of some fake stuff to make it look like this is what one of the shops would have been as you work your way up this area. Now, these little things you see right here and right here, these are that drainage that I'm going to show you or talk about in just a second. So as you continue to work your way up, you go by several other artifacts and things, and then you get up to the end of this, and as the first sight you have, there is the wall, that retaining wall of the Temple of Jerusalem. There's that wall, the same one that I showed you in the last class, that retaining wall of the Temple Mount, that same place where the Romans threw all the stones down whenever Jesus said, "Not one stone shall remain upon the other." Well, he was right. There they are. And there's that road Here's what it would have looked like all the way back down to the pool of Siloam, and it was all buried over. Now, one last tragic aspect of all this, that drainage area I was telling you about. Whenever Jesus said that not one stone shall remain upon the other, and he went on to say, but when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, you'll know the desolation is near. Get out of town. And you know that Christians survived that because they heeded the words of Jesus? They got out of town. But there are millions of Jews that did not, and they stayed, and it got so bad that when the Romans did come in, they went and hid for their lives. Guess where they hid? In that drainage ditch. Guess what the archaeologists found in the drainage ditch? Yeah. And so, and all kinds of things that they tried to get away from the Romans, and the Romans discovered them there and closed it in, and I don't remember all the horrible things that they did, but that was one of the areas where people went to escape. Does that not bring the Bible alive? Does that not help you walk where the faithful walked? I hope this has been interesting and encouraging for you, and help make the Bible be a little bit more relatable as you read it from now on. Thank you so much for your kind attention. We're out of time.